Here are the two big problems that I see with Blizzard's release schedule for Classic World of Warcraft. So we all know that when World of Warcraft very first came out originally, there were tons of patches, tons of crashes, tons of things that weren't planned that they had to fix sort of after the fact, and that meant there was a lot of different release dates. But according to Blizzard, now when they re-release Classic WoW, they plan to do it in 4 different release cycles. And the two biggest problems that I can see with that are the fact that Maul comes out with Molten Core and that Gurub comes out with Blackwing Lair. Here's kind of the problem with that in brief. Maul is a 5-man dungeon. Now it does have several different wings and it is a pretty big 5-man dungeon, but it's a 5-man dungeon. And if it comes out the same time as Molten Core, it's going to kind of nullify a lot of the drops that come out in Molten Core, because the drops that it has in a 5-man dungeon in some cases are better than what you're getting in Molten Core. And its drops are also so good that it jumps right to the top of pre-raid BIS items. Now originally I played a caster, a human warlock. He looked like Gallagher. It's kind of embarrassing now that I look back on it. He had a mustache and a monk haircut. But I can tell you as a caster that there were definitely good trinkets, good rings. I believe there was plus crit gear that dropped out of Maul. May have even been some plus healing gear that dropped out of there, but they were really good items that dropped from Maul. Now keep in mind that on private servers, people are downing Ragnaros in like 20 and 30 minutes. We already kind of have an assumption that Molten Core this time around is going to be easier based on the fact that we're getting 12 debuff spots, and we just have all this sort of institutional knowledge around the classic game now, right? We're also starting with the 112 talents, so we're already kind of knowing that Molten Core is going to be a little on the easy side to begin with. Now you throw in plus healing, plus damage, plus crit, you throw in these type of items, good trinkets, good rings, we're just going to race through Molten Core. And as a player, I can tell you, I don't want that experience taken from me. I don't want to be robbed of going into an epic 40-man raid and just wiping the floor with it because I've gotten all these awesome items from Maul and we have more debuff and it just becomes essentially a face roll at that point. I don't want that to happen with the classic content. You've pretty much got the same story in regards to Gurub when you compare it with Blackwing Lair. Blackwing Lair is a big 40-man raid and Gurub is only a 20-man raid. You need half the people to get into Gurub. But you could argue that with Gurub, it's maybe even a little worse because of an interesting little twist. Not only does Gurub drop in some cases better items than Blackwing Lair, I think there's some plus hit gear that drops from Gurub, but when you complete it, you get a world buff, right? We've heard so much about world buffs, and in Gurub, you get one. I think it's called the Spirit of Zandalar. It's a boost to all your stats. It's either 10, maybe 15%, but I think it's a 10% boost to all your stats. It lasts for 2 hours, and here's the real key with it. It lasts through death. So you have 2 hours to run a roughshot on the World of Warcraft. Again, it's the same argument, right? You're trivializing Blackwing Lair at that point. You're going to face roll through that. And the bigger picture is you're shortening the lifespan of this original content because you're giving players, in one case, more debuffs, starting them ahead in talents. In another case, you're giving them a world buff, you're giving them better drops, but you're trivializing your kind of big hero star of the game, these 40-man raids. So the next place I go with this thought is, why would Blizzard do this? Why would Blizzard only have 4 scheduled releases? And I think it's because that's sort of how they release patches now. They release patches in a 4 scheduled sort of timeline, right? And maybe they're thinking that's what they want to do with the original content as well. And I totally understand it. You want to keep things how you know them, but it's going to shorten the lifespan. It's going to trivialize, rob us players of these big epic experiences that we're having. And ultimately, I don't think it services them as a company in any way, because you want your product, if you're a company, to last as long as it can, to keep subscription numbers up, and to keep people playing, to always give players new goals. Now, if you're like me and you played World of Warcraft originally when it first came out, you know World of Warcraft Original is all about small incremental reoccurring goals. And by stripping 40-man content of any value, by doing things like that, you're shortening up the goals. You're not, we would like to have, I can speak for myself that I would like to have goals as I'm progressing through the game. And maybe that is, I run Molten Core a bunch of times, we get to the 4, 5, 6 month mark, and then I'm like, oh, now there's this killer 5-man dungeon coming out in Dire Maul, I'm going to get the gear from that. Now, one thing both casuals and hardcore players have in common with the original World of Warcraft, with Classic, is we want our effort and our goals spread out over time. That's what Classic WoW is all about. And I can only speak from my experiences giving me my own concerns, but I have heard there's similar concerns when it comes to world bosses and PvPing. So I'll give a quick shout out now to the guys at Classic Cast. They covered the 4-part Classic release schedule a lot in a more thorough way than I did. They did a real deep dive and they talk about some of the problems they see not only with dungeons and raids, but with PvPing, with world bosses and things like that. So go check out Classic Cast episode 20. They dive into this a little bit more deeper than I do as well. Now, this 4-part release schedule seems to be sort of the hot topic around the holidays. If you're concerned about the same things I am, if you're concerned with some things involving PvPing or anything like that, let's get our voice heard. There's been some ideas about having more release dates, more than 4, maybe 6 or 7, things like that. If you have ideas, shoot them to me, shoot them to Blizzard. But let's get our voices heard. Let's get this content to last as long as we can for both casual players and hardcore players, right? We all want to see that. So get your voices heard and let's get WoW in a place as close to the original World of Warcraft as we can. All right, till next video.